Hello and welcome to this webinar on Dime.Scheduler. In the next hour or so, we will take you on a tour of the past and the future of Dime.Scheduler. We will show you the latest features and unveil our roadmap for the coming year. My name is Hendrik Bullens. I am the product manager for Dime.Scheduler, and I will be your host for today. I am joined by a managing partner, Tom Taffin, who will give you a live demonstration of some of the features that have been added recently. After this demo, we will announce our roadmap for 2020, and we will finish with the usual round of Q&A. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you on our YouTube channel. All the announcements we make today are also going to put into writing. We will share you this text in due time, so there's no need for you to write or type anything down. Grab another cup of coffee or tea and relax. Should you have any questions or comments during this presentation, please submit them in the questions pane on the control panel. We will try to answer them at the end of the session during the Q&A round. If we are unable to answer them, we'll get back to you after the webinar. And of course, you can always drop us a line via email. We will be happy to answer all your questions and remarks. Now, our main topic for today is, of course, the roadmap. A part of the process of planning ahead is to look back at what we've done so far. When we were doing this a few months ago, we realized we now find ourselves at a crossroads. I will go into greater detail later, but for now, it suffices to know that we need to make some decisions to shape the future of Dime.Scheduler. Of all the people in the world, I shouldn't be telling you how fast technology is progressing. If we want Dime.Scheduler to remain a useful and relevant planning solution, we need to start acting sooner rather than later. Our goal for today is to share our objectives for 2020. Obviously, this roadmap is part of a bigger plan that goes well beyond the scope of this webinar, but maybe we'll dedicate a separate webinar for this later. But for now, let's focus on 2020. Now, creating the roadmap for 2019 was a pretty easy task. For those who have been working with this long enough will remember that we used to have a Silverlight-based version of the solution. But since Microsoft pulled the plug on this technology in 2015, we made a brand new version from scratch. Since then, many new features have been added, but there have always been a few items missing that were available in the old product. Now, these missing items also happen to be the most requested features from our partners and the customers. So our goal for 2019 was simple: to bridge these gaps and reach feature parity, so that we could close this chapter and move it and take it to the product to the next level. Great. So in this slide here, I highlight a few of the qualities that were added in 2019. Some of these high-profile aspects include recurring appointments, advanced filters, the capacity pivot grids, time slots. We have a brand new documentation platform, etc. We also did quite some work on the map with the addition of bulk select support, location modes, a route sequence component, and so on. And finally, as we will see later on, we've begun our journey to the cloud. Finally, you would say. We started off lightly with support for Azure SQL databases and an on-premise connector for Dynamics 365 Business Central. We'll get back to this later, but for now, know that we'll crank it up a notch in 2020. If you want to have a complete overview, please check out the release notes on the documentation site. Great. I think that's enough talking for now. It's time to see some action. And for this, I would like to introduce you to Tom Taffin. I think most of you know him, but for those who don't, he is the managing partner at Dime, and he is one of the creators of Dime.Scheduler. He has been working in the industry for nearly a decade now, so I can't think of anyone who is better suited to show us some of the new features that we've created in 2019. So Tom, with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. And as you said, it was indeed a very interesting year for us and for the product. So let's have a detailed look at some of the things that we achieved. I will not be showing all last year's features since a lot of them were shown already during our last webinar, shortly before last summer, I think. So today we will focus for this session on what happened after the summer of 2019. And one of the biggest changes, not only for us, I guess, but for everyone in this webinar, was the shift to Business Central and particularly extensions. We said goodbye to our old CAL friend, and we introduced our Dime.Scheduler extension last October. Some partners and customers are actually already using the extension successfully in the meanwhile. And for those who are currently in transformation phase, I briefly want to show a bit today and also mention that from a functional point of view, not that much really changed. The big change is, of course, in the architecture and the way of developing the platform. So you will still find our setup pages for connectivity and general setup and filters and categories and time markers, etc. In the connector. The starting point is still our fast track wizard, which will guide you through all the functional areas in Business Central. The big difference is in the installation of the connector. It's easier than before. No merging with standard objects needed anymore. Our standard buttons will become visible in the different functional areas from the moment you actually activate them in the fast track wizard. So I would like to have a brief look, as I said, to that wizard. So if I go to Business Central and open that fast track wizard, you will see it looks a bit as before, maybe some extra fields, but the main ID is still the same. So we set up our connectivity details. We will enable the functional areas that we need. So for example, we will use standard resources, yes or no. We could set up some standard filters like skills and zones and regions. We could enable service, which was already done up front to this demo. We could enable jobs planning, which I will do now because later in this demo we will use our Gantt chart. So I will also activate the Gantt chart here to demonstrate some of the new features. Of course, there are other functional areas which are supported. We have the assembly orders, everything which is related to production. So work centers, machine centers, the production orders itself. Won't go into too much detail on that today. Sales orders. Finally, also the absences, the absence planning, which I will also activate now in order to have our absences present in the planning solution. So we will synchronize all of this. This will take a moment. It will synchronize now all the resources and filters, including all the absences, to Dime.Scheduler. And once that is done, we can move to Dime.Scheduler itself. Here we are. So as you noticed, not much change from a functional point of view. We did add some minor useful things, which I will not discuss today. And I could also mention that the only code base that will be maintained as of today for our connector will be our extension. So we will not maintain our old CAL code base anymore. Of course, we will do some bug fixing if needed, but no new features will be added on that level. So we're in Dime.Scheduler here, and as I said, I activated the absences, so we can see some absence tasks here now in our open tasks grid. And what I would like to show you is a first new, very popular feature by request from our partners, which was the advanced filtering. With advanced filtering, we mean the filtering of text columns. So nothing changed when we talk about dates and booleans and decimals, but for text, we added a lot of extra functionality to the filter possibilities on the columns. Basically, what we did, you are all used to working in BC. We basically copied the functionality from, or the filter functionality from BC and put it into Dime.Scheduler, which means that you can now use multiple operators like equal, not equal, and or operators. You could use wildcards. You could filter for empty values or not empty values, etc., etc. I don't need to explain. You all know how that works in BC. Well, just to demonstrate a little bit how it works in Dime.Scheduler, let's say in this open tasks list, I would like to filter out my absences. I don't want to see them. Then we will just do it like this as you are used. So smaller than bigger than absences, or just a part of the word of the absence. And then you will see that the absences will be gone from this list. They will not be there anymore. Let's say I would like to have my absences in another grid view next to my open task, so I can easily switch between the two. That is perfectly possible. We can just add another open task grid to our UI. I will put it just next to my open tasks here. And let's say we are going to rename that to absence. There we go. And now we could just filter here on the absence job number. Please note also that there is a new option here, exact match. So if you don't enable that, it will just filter out everything which contains the absence. If you would enable it, it will look for the exact word, which in this case would not be found because I didn't type in the last letter of the word. Regarding the operators, as I said, you can use AND and OR operators. Let me show that also here on the planning board, because these filters will also work here. Basically, in every grid that we have in Dime.Scheduler, these filters, the advanced filters, will work. So let's say in this case, I have here 1, 2, 3, 4 resource types. I have cars, lifts, persons, and rooms. Let's say I want to see 2 of them. We can just type them in. So let's say I want to see persons and rooms, for example. And as you can see, the OR operator is the same. It's also pipe sign as in Business Central. For the N, we will use the ampersand. If you want all resources starting with Linda, you will type Linda and an asterisk, which is also the same as you have in Business Central. So that's one of the new exciting features we wanted to announce here by very popular demands of you, our partners. Okay, what I would like to do now is just make a small planning scenario, and I will go back to Business Central for that. What I did up front to this demo, I created a small extension which was built on top of our Dime.Scheduler extension. So we have Dime.Scheduler base extension here, and I built a small extension on top of that, which is called Dime.Scheduler demo. Just to show you, and now it will get for 1 minute a bit more technical, so please bear with me if you're not a technical profile. It will not take long and it will not go in too much detail. I just want to show to all technical people involved how easy it will be in the future, or it is today actually already, to customize our connector and how you can deal with our events and etc. To do that, I will just minimize this session, and I have my Visual Studio Code open here. This is my demo project, which we just saw. I have 3 objects here just to explain, and so you will be able to follow during the coming minutes. We have added 2 fields to the job task table. One of the fields is required duration in hours, so that means how much time is needed to perform that job task. So that's a new field, which is an integer. And I also added a Boolean field, which is called plan manually. So 2 fields were added to the job task table by an extension. Of course, then we also created a page object where these 2 fields were added. So they will be added on the job card in the job task lines. And I created one code unit, which is a subscriber, an event subscriber to one of our events that we broadcast in our standard connector, standard extension. This event is fired just right before we make the connection with Dime.Scheduler. And what we're going to do in this subscriber is say, okay, we're going to replace some parameters which are set in the basic application of Dime.Scheduler. We're going to replace them with some custom logic that we built here in this function. So for example, the required total duration will be set based on our new field required duration, which we multiply with 3600 because we need it in seconds. And task type will be set based on my plan manually field. Basically, the task type will determine if we're going to plan the task in the Gantt chart or by manually via drag and drop. So this is something that we can now also set in the job card. That's it, not more than that. So a very simple add-on or extension that we just created. It was loaded here into the application. So if I now go back and go to my jobs, and I prepared already a job up front, which is a job for a BC implementation. So if we open it, we will see here that we have some tasks in different phases, an analysis phase, a preparation phase, and a delivery phase, where I've put some required duration. So this is the total time it would take, or the budget, how you want to call it. And for the last one here, I added a task, which is an ongoing task for small development support afterwards that you need to give to the customer, which you don't want to include in the project plan. So I put a budget on it and I said, this needs to be planned manually. This is something we will plan ad hoc and is not included in the project plan. So this will be planned in the Gantt chart. The last one will be planned in or manually via drag and drop. So what we will do now is send that order or that job, to Dime.Scheduler. As I said, from the moment you activate a module in the Dime.Scheduler wizard, the fast track wizard, you will see that this button appears here on the job card. The same counts for service, production, etc. So let's send the job over. And what I will do here in Dime.Scheduler is I'm going to open another profile, which is a job planning profile. So basically I'm logged in with the same user, the same data, you will just see other components on the screen which will be loaded. So we will see some Gantt chart, first of all, to start with. We will see some open tasks grid, which you can have here, and a capacity planning pivot, which is also present here. So let's see if our job is here. Yes, job 2. So we will open that project. So the project will be opening here in the Gantt chart on top of the screen. And I also have my capacity pivot here, which I'm going to refresh, and capacity will be calculated for the corresponding time period. So we talked about the capacity pivot already in our last webinar. I just wanted to point it out again that it exists. It is there since last year. Basically, it is a pivot table which you can completely set up yourself on how you want to see the data, which will reflect the capacity measured against, or the actuals measured against the capacity coming from Business Central in this case, the actuals coming from Dime.Scheduler, of course, from the resource planning. So if we look here on the left side, and I just need to move my webinar a bit, there we go. If you look here on the left side, you have the pivot table where we would be able to add the capacity also to the values, so you can actually see which capacity we're talking about. We could add more row labels, so our resources, we could group them by team. If maybe you don't want to see it on per person individually, but you want to see it per team, that's possible. We have a whole bunch of fields here on which you can group and sort on. And same with the columns. We now are looking at a week view. We could do it by month, by year, by quarter, basically anything you would like. Again, this layout can be saved, as you know, which is the case in the rest of the application too. So this is now looking at actuals and capacity. You can see this resource here is overplanned because it's colored red and it's 120% planned. The ones with 0 are not planned yet, so there's no planning yet for those resources. Okay, let's put some time frame here in the Gantt chart. I will just put 3 months there. Here we go. And of course, now we can start planning. So let's quickly make a small project plan. So of course, we cannot start the preparation phase before the analysis phase is finished. So we're just going to put a dependency between the two of them. And the same counts for the delivery. We cannot deliver if the development is not done. So let's also put a dependency between those two. So let's say I want to start here in week 7 with my analysis. We will do the write-up, let's say in the week after. And let's say the customer needs to respond to that write-up or approve it that week after. So you see everything is moving along. We could also put dependencies between the different tasks with a lot of rules, constraints, deadlines, all of that, you know, from Microsoft Project is there, was already there in previous versions. We just added some small features to the Gantt chart, but the majority stayed the same, I must say. Okay, so now I would like to add some resources to it. So let's have a look who we can add. So on week 7, we have Peter here. I will not work on skills currently, so you could also filter out resources so you can see them by skill, etc. Just because we don't have enough time today, I will not do that. So let's just add Peter here on this line, and then I would like to add someone here on this line. Let's take Patrick in this case. There we go. And I will add for week 10, I will add myself. If I'm here, yes, there I am. I will add myself to the list. So for this one, I will add myself. There we go. So what we're going to do now is synchronize this project. That means that the project plan will be saved. And for all the lines where we have resources, there will be some resource planning created. So in order to show you that, I will go back to my week planning, which I just had. And if we open that, in the meanwhile, the appointments will be created. You will be able to see that the actual jobs were planned. Now, what I would like to show you now is another new feature, which was very popular by request, which was the recurring appointments. There was one task where we said, I don't want this task in the project plan. I want to plan this ad hoc whenever I feel that it's needed. And so let's just take our calendar. I'll just move to March, just take a week in March. Doesn't matter when, just put it somewhere in the project. So now let's say we have our task 999 here, which is ongoing small development. So we now would like to plan a resource for that task. So we see here we need to plan 160 hours. We added the counter here on the open task grid. So I'm just going to move this task to the planning board. As you will see, the counter goes down. So we need 152 more hours. So one approach could be to copy paste this appointment to all the dates where you want it. Now with our new recurrence functionality, you can make a pattern in which this appointment should occur and recur. Basically like you would do in Microsoft Outlook, it's exactly the same functionality, but in this case, it's linked to your back office system, Business Central, with all the business rules that will be applied. So let's create a weekly recurrence pattern. So daily, weekly, monthly, yearly is possible. Let's go for weekly. And we can then change the pattern and say we want this resource to be there every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example. That needs to be done until a certain date, or the resource needs to be there. Well, we had 160, so 20 times 8 hours will be 160. Let's save that and also save that. So now behind the scenes, the server is creating all these different appointments, sending them to BC, to your back office application, and in a second they will come on the screen. In the meanwhile, you can just keep on working, so that's not a problem. There they are. So now these appointments are all created and the task disappears from the open task list because it is fully planned at this point. Of course, you can still change the planning. So I would be able to move this one to another resource. I could remove, I could update the whole series to another resource, etc., etc. These are all standard functionalities on recurring appointments, which we also support. And one last thing which I would like to show you, which is also new and in the most recent versions of Dime.Scheduler, is if you want to have an overview of your whole project now, but from a resource point of view, this is now also possible. And this can be achieved by using the planned tasks grid. So let me just get that on the screen. I will just put it underneath my planning board and I can show both at the same time. Let's do that. And let's make it a bit smaller. So first of all, we would like to filter our project, which is this job number. So if you filter out, you can see we have 52 appointments for that project based on the Gantt chart and combined with the task I just planned with the recurrence. So if I would now select them all, you will note some new icons here in the upper right corner. And one of them here is the highlight in planning board. So if I would click this, you will see that the planning board will reload for the time frame my job is taking. So we're planned from the 10th of February till the 2nd of March. And you will see that all the appointments which have nothing to do with our project are sort of grayed out until you hover over them. You can also not change them. So if I click on it, I cannot do anything. I can only see in a highlighted manner my project tasks. So I can clearly see here my project and the resources that are assigned to it. I could even filter out the resources that are assigned to the project by hitting this extra button here. So then it will just filter out all the rest of the resources which have nothing to do with my project. Of course, these resources have other plannings too. These are still grayed out, but all the rest is highlighted in the planning board. Another nice new feature, or nice to have, what we have here is that you can now also select multiple appointments at the same time. If you use the control key, you could select just 4 at the same time, and you would be able, for example, to move them to another resource this way. So then if I drop them, you will see that they are now all moved at the same time to another resource, again sent back to Business Central at the same time. A lot of minor features have been added also, which we will not discuss today. I think, as Hendrik said, we need to refer you to the release notes for that. If, for example, I double click on one of the appointments, we have redesigned our editor. For example, you will clearly see that here in the resources, if I would assign multiple resources to the appointment, you can see here that you can clearly now just remove the resource from this screen, which in the past you had to go to the combo box, open it and unclick the resource and unselect the resource. There are some nice things coming also next week or the week after by latest in our next release, where you will be able to split appointments. So you will be able to right click on an appointment and say split. You will be able to delete the resource from an appointment from the context menu directly. So we are also investing a lot in small little features which can facilitate the life of the users based on the questions we regularly get from our partners and customers also. So the last thing I would like to show you today, and then we go back to Hendrik to look a bit at the future, is our documentation platform. I'm really very proud of the team of what they achieved the last year, because we managed to get all our manuals in one online platform, which you can now consult. You can access it by browsing to this URL, docs.Dime.Scheduler.com, where you will find all the user manuals. So if I click on user, let's go to the components. There you go, the open task grid. This is a complete explanation of what you can do in the open task grid. If you want to read something about Gantt chart, you can just type in Gantt. click on it, and you will see a whole news article about the Gantt chart with the complete explanation of what you can do. You can see it's pretty extensive. So that's a very nice achievement of the team the last year. Administrator guides are also there, how to create users, how to set up the application, installation guides, of course, how to install it. We'll come back on that in a second when we look to the future. Some guides, some end-to-end guides, I must say. For example, for a new user, creating your own workspace, logging in for the first time. What do I need to do to log in, to change my passwords, to set my time zones, etc. And the last thing I would like to show you here is the news section. Very important one because every new release, our release notes are now placed here in this section. So for example, for the last release, if you look here, the last release from end of December, you will see here what is new, what is next. So we always announce the latest news here in this section. Also, the content of this webinar, as you will see the coming minutes, is also written down here in this URL, but Hendrik will come back to that in a second. So that's it for the past, I would say, or the recent past. Now let's look at the future, and Hendrik can tell us much more about that, our plans for the future, and how we will handle that. Up to you, Hendrik.
Thank you, Tom. That was quite insightful. Now that we've seen what has been done, let's take a look at where we're headed with the product. Based on the feedback we've received from our network, i.e. you, it seems we have reached an important milestone. The most common requests have been addressed to at least some extent. And as I told you earlier, nearly all of these requests originated from the discrepancies between the Silverlight and the web-based editions. Now, you may have heard me saying that these gaps have been bridged to, air quotes, some extent. It's a bit of a bold claim, but we realize that there's much more improvements to be done. But at the very least, we've got the basics covered. You will find out in just a second that this will be a priority, albeit a low-key one, for the year and years to come. Nonetheless, with all these things in the back, we've come at a certain point where we have to assess the situation and act on it. The showstoppers that we've had for the last years have been eradicated, and we no longer see any major reasons for not growing our business and lift Dime.Scheduler to a higher level. Now, this begs the question, where do we go from here? Over the last few months, we have been intensely debating this very topic, even though it was our intention from the outset to make Dime.Scheduler as flexible as possible. It presents an extra challenge when you want to expand the product, make it more robust, without having to compromise on its versatility. An example of this is that we want to create some features specifically for some industries, but we have to make sure that it is still usable for organizations who are not in this industry. And what follows is a proposal to you, our reseller, our distributor, of what we intend to do in 2020 and possibly the years after that. We grouped all of our objectives in 5 categories, and I've listed them here in no particular order, but we aim to improve the product in the areas of maturity, integration, automation, enhanced features, and the cloud. Even though these categories by themselves are meaningless, they allow us to give you and ourselves a very simple overview of what we're on about and what the priorities are. After I explain these objectives, I will put a timeline on this so you know what to expect and when to expect it. Now, let's bring in the first contender, it's maturity. Now, I will be the first one to admit that this doesn't sound like a very promising prospect at first, but bear with me. One of the key messages that we want to convey is that we will turn our attention to you rather than the end users in 2020. For the last few years, we built feature after feature after feature, and in all honesty, the product team paid little attention to the people who are in charge of promoting, selling, implementing solutions like Dime.Scheduler to their customers. One of the areas in which is becoming apparent is the installation process. It is tedious and it requires heaps of manual steps. For this, we started working on an improved and simplified installation procedure. We wanted to make it as simple as possible for you to get started. As far as you and your customer are concerned, you should be able to press a button and have a running instance available within minutes. This is what we're aiming for. In addition to this, we also want to provide extra training and documentation materials that should support both you and your customer. I think the new documentation platform is already a good start. We are getting near to 100,000 words, which is the equivalent to a 200-page book, and we still have a lot of content to add. Even though we don't have any direct plans, we thought it'd be a good idea to review our training sessions and provide some kind of on-demand online training platform. If this is what it takes to reduce the complexity and rollout time, then this is what we'll do. We can already announce a release candidate is coming up. It's going to be the all-in-one installer. We will ship this in the release after the next release. By the way, release 2020.1 is just around the corner. We hope to ship it next week. Worst case would be the week after this. Release 2020.2 should be expected at the end of the quarter. Now, just to give you a little sneak preview, here's a little example of the installer. So this is the startup view. You'll see some links to documentation. You'll see what this application is going to do. And more interestingly, we have two extra tabs at the top. We have an Azure tab and an installation tab. Oops, I'm sorry about that. There we go. If you go to the second tab here, the Azure tab, this tab enables you to provision an environment on Azure that Dime.Scheduler needs to function. You can configure a virtual machine, you can configure the Azure SQL and so forth. You can change the size of the machine, you can change the version, the performance level. So you can pick, if you're working on a test environment, you can go for something very light and cheap. You can change it also for production purposes. So we really wanted to make this all-in-one, one-click installer. So it should be as easy as possible. So it's a matter of clicking a button and you have your Azure environment up and running within minutes. You just have to relax and wait until the thing is done. Now, the third tab is all concerned about the installation itself of Dime.Scheduler. You have a bunch of options which you can opt for if you only want to install the web application or if you want to install the back office. It's all up to you. And everything else is just configuration. By default, we added most of them according to the best practices. If you want to override these, you're free to do so. Common things you would have to modify are connection strings for Azure SQL or either dedicated SQL server, some service account names. So everything you will ever need to configure in Dime.Scheduler, it's all here. Just to show you how it did work in progress, let me just show this. Click a button, and then behind the scenes, there will be a bunch of scripts that we'll be running. You just have to wait until the thing is doing its job. And after it's done, you have a running installation, just like that. So we're quite optimistic that this will reduce a lot of time and energy for the whole network. So we want to invite you to use this as soon as it's out, give us your feedback, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, let's bring in the next contender, integration. Now, Dime.Scheduler was designed with integration at the very core. Obviously, you're already familiar with the Navision and the Business Central connectors, possibly the Exchange connector. It takes little effort for us to add new connectors to the ecosystem. We can already confirm today that we will begin proceedings on a bidirectional cloud-first Exchange connector and also a standalone connector. Depending on the feedback from the community, we can move our text and WhatsApp message connector out of the experimental phase and make it available to the public. Now, let's step back for a second and go back to the standalone connector. As you know, or you may know, Dime.Scheduler relies on external systems to feed data like jobs and tasks. There have been a number of cases in the past where such integration wasn't necessary. And at this point, we don't have any user-friendly way of providing such data. But a standalone connector would address this issue. With a bunch of tables, sheets, form, whatever it is, we would provide a graphical user interface to enter this data. Now, we were very early in the process of gathering these requirements, so all options are still open. As always, your feedback is highly appreciated, so please get in touch. We're also going to be looking for ways to tap in the suite of power tools that Microsoft has built over the years. With Power Apps and Flow, you can build and connect powerful applications without a single line of code. Likewise, for reporting, we'll be investigating the possibilities of Power BI. Something that is in a further stage in the development cycle is the Business Central connector extension on AppSource. The connector is already available today for on-premise instances, but we aim to publish the extension on AppSource before the summer. Again, if you're interested in any of these ideas, drop us a line and share your thoughts. Furthermore, if you have any other suggestions in terms of integration, please do get in touch. We'd like to hear from you. The next category is probably the one we are most excited about. Automation is an umbrella term for anything that refers to making Dime.Scheduler more intelligent. Now, these are two buzzwords. Intelligence and automation are often associated with the image of robots taking over people's jobs. But for now, I don't think it will be as dramatic for Dime.Scheduler, because probably the end goal of this category would to have some kind of algorithm that can churn out the perfect planning based on constraints like availability, location, skills, etc. The task of a human operator would be reduced to supervise the proceedings as the algorithm is doing its job. With that said, the technology is already there, and I may simplify things right now, but the challenge is not to create the algorithm, it is to implement it and make it fit in Dime.Scheduler. We want to keep the software as flexible as possible, and end users should be able to opt in and opt out as they please. So it will take some time to finalize this design and analysis. So we don't expect anything worth mentioning in 2020, but we'll go right ahead and start design and start reaching out to the people who need this kind of algorithms. Before we have this super intelligent algorithm ready in place, we'll look for intermediate solutions to make the life of the planner just a little bit easier. One request that we increasingly receive is to have some kind of scoring system that is able to suggest a resource that is available or qualified or nearby to carry the task, or all of them. Perhaps there are a few less dramatic or less impressive features, maybe, that we will be able to do this year. We see a lot of potential in the visual planning through the map. Planners should be able to assemble a trip on the map and then just plan it right ahead on the planning board. Combined with the concept of appointment containers, we have made a great step forward in the automation process. Now, just a quick note on the appointment containers. They are conceptually the same as task containers, but instead of grouping tasks together, they would group appointments together. So this allows us to treat a group of appointments as one single entity. And this gives us a myriad of possibilities. And because it's such a lightweight concept, we can apply it to anything that may ever come up. The penultimate category is the one I hinted at before. We labeled it advanced features because there is a lot of functionality in the application that can be extended and made more powerful. They don't necessarily add new capabilities, as existing functions can be made more effective or usable for users across industries. Now, there are so many feature requests that would fall under this category. There are just too many to sum up here. We just picked a few items that we intend to do this year. They include impromptu time slots, exporting and printing, reporting, and of course we have much more, but we don't have enough time to cover all of them. So let's pick as the impromptu time slots. These ad hoc time slots would fit in nicely with the calendars. Whereas calendars are static and applicable for a group of resources, impromptu time slots are generated on the fly and can apply to any resource for any reason. The classic example or use case would be illness of a resource. It's something you don't plan ahead, but it certainly affects the planning of that particular resource. Calendars are just unable to handle this kind of exceptions, but these time slots would do just fine. Within a few clicks, the availability of the resource will be up to date, and the planner will be enabled to modify the schedule if necessary. Now, if we fast forward just a second to the day when we announced this fancy plan algorithm, can you imagine what would happen in this situation? This algorithm would just update everything immediately, so you won't have to lift a finger to have a revised planning. It will take some time, but all the pieces with it will fit in nicely. To quote the leader of the free world, it's gonna be huge. But let's not get carried away here. We've got two more items that can be improved and will be improved shortly. Firstly, we have the export and printing. Now, this is not a big surprise. Everybody loves their Excel sheets. So we start off with some simple export capabilities so planners can export to PDF Excel sheets, and if they want to, they can just print it out to disperse with their resources. With the great success of Power BI, we'll be looking for ways to provide some kind of ready-to-use templates of some sorts, which can be freely customized. We want to keep it as simple as possible, but immediately applicable. We will begin proceedings on the export and printing as soon as we have shipped 2020.1. So that will be very shortly. Okay, we're almost there. There's one more category to go. And this category has been on our roadmap for, I think, forever, but this time we are serious about it. In fact, we've already begun our journey to the cloud, and we've already reached a first stage in the journey. If we could build Dime.Scheduler from scratch again without a customer base, we would probably go straight for the SaaS solution. But due to historical reasons, we have an existing application that is hosted on premises that we need to transform to make it work on a multi-tenant cloud platform. This transformation consists out of 3 stages. We have the lift and shift stage, hybrid cloud, and Dime.Scheduler as a service, or SaaS. The first stage involves the simple task of making the product as is work on a cloud platform. Because of Dime's association with Microsoft and its technology stack, Azure was a no-brainer. We're happy to announce that we've reached the first milestone, and we will ship a release candidate in the next release, which we can expect in March. To put it in very simple terms, you'll be able to run Dime.Scheduler on an Azure virtual machine and on Azure SQL databases. So this means none of the own infrastructure is going to be used. You have your own environment on Azure and nothing is shared. This is why we call it lift and shift. Instead of running it in your own data center, it will be run on Azure. The jury is still out whether we will actually pursue the following 2 stages, because we need to make some kind of strategical decision here. Once we start leveraging these cloud-only services, there will be a point of no return, as Dime.Scheduler will effectively have morphed into this hybrid cloud application. Customers who have a policy against this probably won't be willing to adopt Dime.Scheduler. So far, we've received mixed responses. Some cannot wait to go to the cloud, while others are quite reluctant. Of course, we'll try to do everything within our power to support both these hosting models, but at some point, it won't be sustainable anymore. And we'll have to choose one over the other. And I'm afraid we'll have to drop this on-premise instance deployment model, especially if we want to reach the final stage, because then there will only be one option. It's going to be the cloud way or the highway. Thus, it's still a point of contention whether we should move beyond this first stage. We want to hear your thoughts, so please reach out, give us your recommendations, and the more information we have, the better and more informed decisions we can make. Okay, so that's that. Let's put all of this on a little timeline, shall we? With the first quarter almost drawn to a close, we can announce the release candidates for the Azure environment and the all-in-one installer. As part of our monthly and bi-monthly releases, you can expect to see exporting and printing capabilities in Dime.Scheduler 2020.2. So that's going to be March. In the second quarter, we intend to work on the connectors. Probably the bidirectional exchange connector will be tackled first. And we'll start off with a proof of concept of this standalone connector. And we'll run it by our partners and customers who've expressed their interest. And if there is any interest for it, we'll also bring the text and WhatsApp connector out of the lab and bring it into the release cycle. Finally, we want to publish this BC extension on AppSource as soon as possible, but realistically, we should aim for the end of the year. After the summer, we'll have had sufficient time to define a detailed plan for the automation category. And as part of the plan, as I announced earlier, appointment containers will be the first step in this journey. And finally, to close out the year, we'll free up some time to implement some new features, and existing functionality will be improved. Having developed this roadmap, with the risk of sounding like a lawyer, I want to make it clear that this is not a commitment, but rather a statement of intent. I'm not saying this to cover our butts. No, the reason is very simple. We want to work together with you, the reseller, more closely. Whether you are working on a big case, you are building your own solution, whatever it may be, we are willing to go the extra mile to help you serve your customers better. To illustrate our intentions, let me give you just one simple example. We are tinkering with the idea of white labeling Dime.Scheduler. This would mean that you can brand the solution with your own logos, with your own color schemes, as if it was your own. If this means you can include it in your solution package more easily and promote it to the customers, then that is what we'll do. So even though we want this roadmap to move forward, it may shift, but it all depends on your cooperation. If you want to read everything we announced here today, please check out the documentation site, head over to the news section, and you'll find an article that covers pretty much everything we've told you today. And with that, I think it's time for some Q&A. So let's have a look at the little question list. Okay, here's one. I think, Tom, you'll be able to answer this one. Will the installer be capable of updating existing installations?
I basically have a very short answer on that one. Yes. So yes, existing installations will be updated also by the installer.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next. Okay. How can we currently connect Business Central in the cloud to Dime.Scheduler?
Yeah, well, as you said, Hendrik, we are working on our app source certification, I would say, for the connector. That will still take some time. In the meanwhile, we already have actually some customers running in the SaaS or the cloud version of BC. If you have some customers who are interested, just let us know. We can deliver you a renumbered and renamed version of our connector, and so you can at least get you started on the cloud. So it is not a problem to get you started today, but it is not through AppSource. That will come later this year, as announced earlier.
Okay, great. I think we have one more here. Will the new Exchange connector be bidirectional?
Yes, indeed. So that's our goal. Maybe not in the first release, I would say. We first need to recreate what we have today, but then in the cloud model. If we can do it immediately, why not? It still needs to be investigated. We're taking the first steps now. The end goal would be to have a bidirectional Exchange connector, indeed, since we get that question regularly from our partner channel.
Okay, thank you. I think we're out of questions here, and we're right on time. So we'll wrap it up from here. Thank you for attending this webinar. As I promised, the recording of the webinar will be uploaded to YouTube and shown with you shortly. Thanks again, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.